and welcome to another edition of the Summer Grill here on speedcafe.com, brought to you by KTM, makers of enduro bikes, mini bikes for your kids, two-stroke, four-stroke, motocross. They've got an unbelievable heritage, history in that side of things. Check them out on the KTM website. Joined by Simon Chapman and Greg Murphy for this edition, and we're going to dedicate it to the future of supercars. So much has been talked about Gen 3, the next generation of the sport, and what we can look forward to and expect. And at the moment, it's all looking like a coupe-based formula, and there's lots of fans to be excited about here, isn't there?
Yes, certainly the advent of Gen 3 is a really important time for the championship. It actually got pushed back a year. It was initially going to be introduced in 2021, and it's probably the best thing that it hasn't happened, especially considering what happened in 2020. But certainly a major moment for the championship. You know, an evolution on Gen 2 with some fairly sizable tweaks at the end of the day. Obviously the chassis is the main one, a chassis that's more suited for two-door models, a wider scope of road-going cars to fit onto that chassis. So I think, interesting time for the championship in terms of creating a chassis which they hope will bring some new manufacturers to the championship.
And Murph, within the bounds of that, we'll get to see a Mustang as you would on the road, rather than trying to engineer it to fit the current scenario. It'll look exactly like on the outside what you see in the
like
dealership.
An OEM car. Yeah. I mean, we know there was a fair bit of criticism when the current Mustang was launched and brought out. I mean, that was born about because of the inability to change the chassis itself, as Simon just said. So the roll hoop's a bit higher. Just the way that structure of that car was designed was for four-door cars like the VF Commodore and the FGX Falcon. So obviously that changed, and the chassis didn't change, and then all of a sudden you've got to put a two-door coupe body on top of the same chassis, and it didn't quite fit properly. I mean, it's been very successful so far, but moving forward into 2022, we are going to see cars that represent a lot closer to what you buy off the showroom floor in respect to Mustang, and obviously maybe not Camaro, but the Camaro as it would be if it was in America. So I'm really excited about Gen 3 because I think, based on what we've had changed so far and what we've seen, what is going to be implemented, I reckon it's going to be the best supercar we've had in quite a long time, maybe the best supercar, because of the sport removing a bunch of things and becoming a little bit more controlled. It's taken it all away from those teams that have got those big budgets, the resources to be able to buy their way through, because they've got those things to play with. And I think it's going to mean a little bit more like 2020, having a few more people experience what it's like to be at the front of the field, stand on the podium, and for the sponsors that are participating with those teams and with those cars. So, I think we're going down the right track for sure.
Two questions to both of you here to dive in on. Firstly, will the cost cutting go far enough? It needs to. And secondly, will it entice other manufacturers?
I guess that's the big question mark, isn't it? There's a lot of chatter sort of behind the scenes around how much the cars will cost. Supercars are targeting around 350k for a complete car, but Murph can probably attest to the fact that we've kind of heard these figures before, and inevitably the car becomes a lot more expensive than its initial cost. And I think that was kind of the trauma that we went through with Gen 2, was that we started with a car that was relatively cheap, but just as the years wore on and the scope for development sort of opened up, they just became more and more and more expensive, and the car is sort of closer to the 600k end. So we're kind of going back to the future in some ways. We're trying to go back to where we were, and Tim Edwards always talks about, it's not cost reduction per se, it's cost containment. It's trying to keep that cost within a window. So there are lots of little elements that are trying to do that. So having componentry, which we already have, carry over to the new chassis. We've got new controlled componentry, whether that's the wheels or the fuel system, or just little bits and pieces which will probably make a little bit of a difference, but probably not a massive amount of difference. But there has to be some fundamental cost cutting that goes into it. So there's sort of been chatter about creating like flat pack sort of chassis and things like that, or having one chassis distributor per se. But there's basically got to be a lot of things going on that cut costs to keep it within that window.
I think we've actually learnt lessons. I really do. I don't think we've learnt many up until this point, but I think that the team that's putting together Gen 3 have actually learnt lessons, and I think from Car of the Future and then Gen 2 and the initial Car of the Future, it it blew out straight away. It was never even close to what it was intended to be as far as cost. And we started on the back foot massively, and have actually learnt that we can cut costs. We can still have a car that performs at such a really high level, that's enjoyable to watch, that looks tough, and gets the job done as far as race car drivers sitting behind the steering wheel and going racing. And control components like dampers, that kind of stuff, has been a key part of bringing that back, because you give teams windows to be able to go and focus and spend money. Then if they've got it, they'll find a way and they'll spend it. And that's not possible for every team. And I think Gen 3 really does take note of all those situations, and I really do think we're going to be as close to around that 350 mark we could possibly be. They haven't gone and said it's 250, which would be a ridiculous number. They've said 350, which I think is very, very achievable.
Let's not forget too that the current supercar isn't all that different from the car that we had about 7 years ago when Car of the Future sort of came around. So, while the costs have increased, realistically, what's different between that car that we had then and the car that we've got now? It's just the skin, basically. The Commodore is fundamentally the same. The Mustang or the Falcon, they're fundamentally the same. They're all powered by the same engines. It's just a skin on it, and there are little bits sort of here and there where they've been able to basically develop and increase costs by developing the car. So yeah, I think it's an interesting period for the championship. They're talking about having controlled engines. It's still going to remain as a V8 formula at the end of the day, so I think that's pretty crucial. But I think that may end up maybe pegging them back a little bit too, because if they're trying to attract manufacturers to the championship, how many manufacturers are really making V8s these days?
But that's where I think we've moved on. I really do. I think if there's a control engine and it's you put rocker covers on that suit your brand. I mean, I think we can do that. I think manufacturers have shifted maybe their thought process a little bit on that one. I think it's about the silhouette more so, and also having the badge on there. And I don't personally believe that the fans are so critical about that so much anymore. Yes, Ford and Holden, maybe we've moved on from that phase where it was a critical part of the car and the DNA of it having a Chevy-based or a Ford-based engine on the bonnet. But I think we can have a category that delivers in every aspect and still looks tough, muscle cars that represent really what the culture and the past is all about with touring car racing in this country, and move on a little bit from those little details that really aren't so significant anymore.
I think the fascinating thing that supercars are trying to do with Gen 3 is not necessarily say to a manufacturer, okay, yeah, come invest a heck of a lot of money into it. They're basically saying to those manufacturers, can I take your silhouette and put it on my chassis?
Yep.
So I can go to, for example, Jaguar or Hyundai, and I say, I want the such and such, the i40, and I want to put it on this chassis. How much is that going to cost me, sort of thing? So that's sort of what we're talking about now, less so about manufacturers actually investing money and having, like, for example, a factory Kia team. And
I think that day's probably gone.
Yeah, I think we're past that point, and even in global motorsport, we can see that a lot of manufacturers are sort of focusing more so towards either fully electric or hybridization. And even then, when we get Gen 2, we're not guaranteed that we're going to get the hybrid elements. There's provisions in the chassis for them to have electrification, but that's not guaranteed. And even when electrification does come, all the cars will have to have it. That's basically what.
And it'll be the same system. It'll be a common control system. Yeah. So yeah, and I think we've still got plenty of opportunity to continue to own what V8 supercars is for a long time to come. Personally.
The final part of this is to, I guess, acknowledge that when they are developing Gen 3 here, where does it place? I mean, it's not a GT car. It doesn't need to be TCR. That's already established. I think it's great. It's maintained its own identity, which is where you were going before. It tips its hat to the history of touring car racing in Australia and this part of the world. It keeps that V8 element that fans still love. And although the automotive world may be moving on, and not a lot of manufacturers are developing and working in that space, there's still an immense love for it among our fans, mate, isn't there?
And that's what you've got to remember and you've got to focus on. You know, as I say, it's muscle cars. They're a little halo kind of cars. I mean, if you can't have one, it's not for everyone, and maybe you can't buy a Camaro. I don't think it matters because the name represents so much. It's like, it's like the Mustang. It is an iconic brand. It's an iconic symbol of muscle car, and that's what we still love, I think, and what the fans still love about our categories. We're still tough. We're big. We're fat. We take up space on the racetrack, and they've got a presence about them, our cars, and they will do even more so with Gen 3.
We'd love your thoughts. Leave a comment below on the Gen 3 regulations. This will be a topic that we'll cover extensively right here on speedcafe.com as we gradually see some of those images and vision of those new cars emerge throughout the 2021 season, and very much looking forward to seeing them hit the track for a big year in 2022. That wraps up another edition of the Summer Grill, proudly brought to you by KTM. Ready to race, and we'll have another topic for you real soon. KTM are giving away some awesome summer essentials each week. Stay cool with a KTM Powerwear pack featuring a shirt, cap, thongs or jandals, sunglasses and lanyard. To enter the draw, all you need to do is subscribe to Speed Cafe in the sign up box below this video. It is that easy. And we'll have another episode of the KTM Summer Grill for you tomorrow. Stay tuned.